Resident Evil was once considered the epitome of survival horror, but these days it's about as widely known as Ada Wong's secret agent identity that the franchise has evolved and mutated almost beyond all recognition over the last 2 decades.
What is this place?
Now in the place of crumbling mansions, cryptic puzzles and kicky berets, we have university campuses running crimson, more ammo than we know what to do with, and action-packed jaunts through nondescript modern cityscapes with a Bravo team at your back. It's almost universally accepted by fans and critics alike that the technological limitations of the time were what actually helped make the original Resident Evil as atmospheric as it was. But if it were made again today, if Shinji Mikami were to sit down right now and start all over again from scratch, would things be different? And, perhaps even more importantly, should they be?
A dining room.
The thing people playing now tend to love or hate about the early Resident Evil games, but either way always remember, are the fixed camera angles. And loading up the PS4, Xbox One re-release of the Gamecube remake of the original game, bloody hell, it does take a while to get used to them again. More often than not, you'll proceed down a corridor only to have the viewpoint shift midway, resulting in the direction you're travelling changing and your character going right back the way they came as a result. It's a disorienting effect, especially since Spencer Mansion is labyrinthine even when you have a vague idea of where you're going. And somehow this seems even more pronounced now when playing the game with the speedier, more modern alternate control scheme rather than the original one, which uses the D-pad to turn sideways as well as move forward and backwards. And of course, no matter which version you're playing, there's no moving and shooting at the same time. This is classic Resi. These limitations are frustrating, yeah, but they're frustrating precisely because they're limiting, making the undead threat all the more dangerous. When you hear a zombie moan and you can't see where it's coming from and it could very well be right beside you, nightmare fuel. The third-person over-the-shoulder Resident Evils have never really come close to replicating that feeling. There are other ways the game puts pressure on the player. A limited inventory, for example. You can't pick up every item you come across, so you have to make judgment calls or remember which item goes where and leave it where you found it until its use becomes apparent or more immediate. And it's important to check those items, as many won't become useful until you thoroughly examine them in the inventory screen. Books might have secret panels, for example, or upon inspection, a coin could turn into a key. Yep, the Spencers really knew how to take the challenge of stumbling home drunk to the next level. Another quirk that made the original Resident Evil memorable, but gaming today has very little time for, is the restrictive save system, whereby the playable character, Jill or Chris, will need both an old typewriter and an ink ribbon to save the game. Ink ribbons have finite uses attached to them, so it's entirely plausible that you could run out of saves, spawn a load of Crimson Head zombies, and make progression very difficult, or even, impossible for yourself. There are enough uses in an ink ribbon that the scenario would be unlikely, but it's possible, and that's enough to make you second guess yourself. Could we do without that system in 2015? Well, yeah, it would certainly make things easier, but because of that, it would rob the game of a huge part of its tension, and we have enough hand-holding going on in other horror games. Nothing kills fear faster than a regularly checkpointed save system. Other hand-me-downs from the original game don't work so well. The door-opening loading animations, for example, are kept in presumably for nostalgic reasons, but after your first dozen in quick succession, the fond memories run their course and it just becomes annoying. And they look even more sluggish and out of place on a HD 16:9 widescreen than they did on the original standard 4:3. The pace is probably the main thing about the old Resi games that modern horror fans will struggle with. It's a much slower burn than even current survival titles. For that reason, classic Resi simply will never be everyone's cup of hot zombie entrails, but that won't stop its fans begging Capcom to return the franchise to its survival roots. And though plenty of its mechanics are outdated, they're still just as effective as they were in 1996.